Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by co-host and editor of the Wolfpacker.com, Matt Carter. And today we are going to break down NC State football's 2022 signing class. If you're listening to this podcast, today is Wednesday, December 15th, or beyond. You might be listening to this, a few days down the road, but this is going to be about NC State's football signing day. The early signing period is over. That's why you see all these coaching turnovers here in the last few weeks of the season. Maybe something the NCAA, college football as a whole, will look into, just considering all the coaching turnover in these last few weeks. Main motivation here, recruiting. It always comes back to recruiting, but no turnover in NC State. Coach remains the same. Coaching staff remains the same, at least for now, and a lot of the roster is going to remain the same heading into 2022. But there will be several new additions, and we're going to break it all down here in this podcast. But before we do that, some quick reminders for our listeners and viewers at home. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. So go subscribe wherever you listen to them. These podcasts will automatically download in your feed, and you don't have to search for us every time you want to hear about some Wolfpack sports. You should also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up while you're at it, and drop a comment below. Last few episodes, we've been asking our viewers a question for you to answer in the comment section. So maybe something will come up during this episode. I'll ask you maybe who you're most excited about of this 2022 signing class. We'll get to that a little bit later. And also, now this podcast is as great as reason as any to go ahead and make the jump and sign up for the On3 premium service. If you haven't heard already, the Wolfpacker is a part of the On3 network now. Made the jump over to this new great college sports database, websites. There's fan sites for all the biggest sports programs in the country, NC State included, and you know the Wolfpacker. It's been running for over 4 decades now, and it is now part of the On3 network. So same old. When you go to the search bar, search thewolfpacker.com. It'll take you to the same place. You'll be reading Matt Carter's content. You'll be reading some of my content. You'll be reading the contributors that you've grown to love and appreciate, and you love coming back. So go over to on3.com. Go to thewolfpacker.com. Sign up for a year's worth of premium subscription. It's only $1. And this podcast is a great reason to, because we're going to talk a little bit about the signing class. But if you want to read, the gritty details about all these guys, you want to read the premium analysis on what to expect for NC State football in the years to come, head over to thewolfpacker.com, pull out your credit card, maybe check your checking account, make sure you have $1 in your checking account first, and then go ahead and plug in your information, because it's only going to cost you $1 for the rest of this year. It's going to take you to the end of 2022. Hey, Matt, this time next year, maybe NC State is celebrating its first ACC football championship in what would have been almost 40 years, 30-ish years? What, 70?
Yeah, 40 years. It's over.
Wow.
Not my lifetime. I was born in 1980.
It's been a long time if Matt wasn't alive for the last one, so.
Easy now.
We're talking about 17 and 18-year-olds here, so that's always going to make you feel old, even me, and I'm 24, and it already makes me feel old. So, Matt, let's jump into this class. 12-man recruiting class, smaller than pretty much every class that you've covered to this point. Is this the smallest NC State signing class that you've covered to this point?
Oh, easily. There have been some small classes, but this is a byproduct of. I've ranted about this before, but I'll do it one more time, of the silliness of NCAA freezing eligibility last year. It was an unnecessary move. It was an overreaction to the overreaction of the Big Ten, who canceled college football in late July, early August, and expected everybody just to say, oh, yeah, the Big Ten does it, we'll do it too. And when the rest of the big power players in college football said, no, we're going to go ahead and play. And then the Big Ten relented and went ahead and play. They should have given an extra redshirt year is what they should have done, which would allow players who maybe had already redshirted to have what you could call a COVID redshirt, which is basically allowed them to sit out without punishment and maintain eligibility where it's at for those. But for those who wanted to play, it should have continued the clock. And the byproduct of that is that you have all these guys staying an extra year longer than you anticipated. NC State already has 7 guys who would have been seniors this year who have announced they're coming back next year for an extra year, super senior year. Great for NC State, but when you only have 85 scholarships and the NCAA gave you a one-time exception last year over the 85 limit, but they're not doing it this year. The end result is you're lucky to find a room for a dozen new players. Honestly, they're very, it's going to be tight to get all 12 of these guys in. And I think a lot of them probably wanted to be in the spring, but I'm not sure many, if any, will be able to get into spring football because they just don't, they got the scholarship limit to worry about. So it's, it's definitely interesting, but that's why it was a smaller class, and I'll say it for the 1900 millionth time. It was totally unnecessary to freeze eligibility. NC State will benefit from it, particularly next year, but it was still an unnecessary move.
I was just about to say, Matt, I hear you. You've been banging that drum ever since the Big Ten tried to cancel football season last year. This is premature. You didn't like the move at the time. And I respect it. It's got reason. It's got logic. But if you're wearing your red tinted glasses, it might be one of the best things the NCAA has done for NC State athletics in the past decade. And we'll see how the season, ends up, coming about next year. I mean, with all these expectations, it almost starts to make you a little bit nervous. Like, are we putting too much into 2022 already? But it's going to be a very talented squad. There's going to be a lot of returning talent. I think NC State fans are actually quite happy that there is an extra year of eligibility out there for some of these players who have become stars in Raleigh. So let's get into the signing class. And the way I want to do this, because it's a little bit smaller, there's not as many guys to break down. I think as we go kind of position group by position group, we can just kind of talk about, the state of the position group going into 2022. Maybe, you can kind of say who you might expect could see some time as early as next year. I think a lot of these guys, it's going to be developmental years just because there's going to be so much experience ahead of them. But there's also some talent in this class. I think we've got to start with the quarterback position, right? That's always the biggest prize recruit. Maybe not the highest rated, but the one that kind of got everything started in motion here. So MJ Morris out of Atlanta, Georgia, Pace Academy, dual threat quarterback. We know that the coaching staff loves MJ's athleticism. We know that, as long as Tim Beck is around as the offensive coordinator, he's a guy that, historically has liked these dual threat quarterbacks that can get it done through the air and on their legs. Devin Leary, that's not necessarily the scouting report on him. I don't know if you'd call him a dual threat quarterback, although he's not lethargic on his feet. He certainly is not one of the ACC's rushing leaders among quarterbacks, at least this season. Maybe it's something that will be a part of his game going into next year. We'll see. But Matt shakes his head. I don't know. You doubt Devin Leary's athleticism, but we'll see, man. We'll see. He's a great passer. Defenses are going to have to adjust. But let's talk about MJ. We know he's going to be able to rush the football. What's your takeaway from just watching his tape, your interactions with MJ, and how quickly could NC State fans maybe expect to see MJ Morris as the starting quarterback at NC State one day?
Whenever Devin Leary leaves, he'll be in the mix in that competition. That'll be one of the interesting things to watch next preseason. Is to kind of have you got Ben Finley who be a red shirt. They will both be red shirt freshmen, but Ben Finley will be in his third year at NC State, and McLaughlin will have had a full year on a spring at NC State. If there's a guy who will get to participate in the spring, I'm sure they will let MJ Morris be at the top of the list of guys that can play for spring. But he is a good athlete. He's actually a really good baseball player. So, um, yeah, that might be another reason besides the fact that he's a quarterback to get MJ Morris up here in the spring. You
And
don't want him.
He's going to play baseball at NC State too, right?
That's his intention for
Okay.
sure. You know, I have no doubt he can probably pull it off. I just put the cautionary tale of the actual ratio of guys who say they're going to play two sports in college and actually pull it off is a pretty small ratio. But he intends to. He's an athletic guy. It was a very interesting recruitment. He was one of the first quarterbacks NC State offered at the position. I don't think NC State was really at the forefront of his recruitment, but I think that changed when Lyndon Cooper committed and signed. His old teammate at Carrollton High School, one of his best friends. Lyndon Cooper enrolled early, had a great time at NC State, and that, I think, kind of opened MJ Morris's eyes. And honestly, MJ being a little bit more patient with his recruitment played out to NC State's favor because some of the schools that offered him MJ Morris ended up taking other quarterbacks. Florida State was kind of a prominent one in that mix. I know that was a school that MJ Morris really liked. So, the combination of patience and getting Lyndon Cooper on campus, for the second straight year, NC State's got a good dual threat quarterback. I don't think people remember that Aaron McLaughlin's a great athlete too. So 2 straight years of great athletes coming into the quarterback position to kind of gives you a dynamic in the offense that maybe you didn't have before. And I'll say this, MJ Morris this year took Carrollton to the state semifinals of the state playoffs. I think they went 12-2. They lost to Buford, who won the state title, one of the best programs in the country, traditionally year in, year out. So the guy's a winner, which probably the number one trait you're looking for in a quarterback, right? You want guys that win football games. And
because there's no better stat to evaluate a quarterback's play than quarterback wins.
Yeah, the bottom line. I mean, maybe he's a byproduct of who he's playing with, but he's still the engine that makes the vehicle run. And
I'm joking, of course, but I hear you. When it comes to high school, Matt, when you've got a great quarterback, you're going to win a lot of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen quarterbacks NC State have taken where the high school team did not have good win-loss records, and interestingly, they didn't have good win-loss records and performances at NC State either. So, it'll be interesting. That'll be the interesting preseason battle of maybe who can emerge between Ben Finley, Aaron McLaughlin, and MJ Morris. And I think the key for MJ is getting here in the spring to kind of be in the mix for that. And next year, Devin Leary's last year. If he has another year like he had this year, probably will be his last year. And that opens up the door wide open for whomever is left of those 3 guys. Because, some of those guys will have to make decisions about where they stand after preseason camp or after fall camp. And maybe all 3 of them say, you know what? Wide open competition, and any of us can win. But that I think that's realistically what you're thinking. Unless there's an injury, you're thinking spring 2023 when those guys are all probably fighting it out for the starting job, unless Devin Leary comes back for a 19th year of NC State football.
Well, I think, as NC State fans, they get the fresh taste of their mouth of all these returning players, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't want to see that next year. You want to see all these guys go ahead and go to the pros next year because they've had such great seasons that their draft stock is just so great that they can't pass on the opportunity to go enter their names in the draft. So we will see. I agree with you. I think next year will be Devin Leary's last at NC State because you look around the ACC, it was a stacked conference with quarterbacks. Devin Leary had a great season, and some of these quarterbacks are going to go on, go pro. I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks. He was already one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC this year. He could be a potential preseason first team, maybe even second team if he still gets the disrespect that NC State has continued to get all year. If that carries on to the offseason, we'll see. But we'll have to do another State of the Position Group podcast after the season, Matt. There's so many questions, so many angles I'd love to go into, but we've got to get through this signing class here. So let's transition on to running back. Michael Allen, one of the 4 stars, according to On3, one of 3 4-stars in this signing class.
I want to clarify that. That's the On3 consensus, which is kind of like the one network, and with the equal weight to all the others. So basically, they take the 4 services and they give them all equal weight, and came up with what's called the On3 consensus, which is the only ranking to give equal weight to all of the rankings. So that's the key component to all of that, and a key distinction that needs to be pointed out. So basically, it's just taking a straight up average of the ESPN 247 Rivals and On3, and giving you, okay, there's 4 different services. This is the average if you put them together, and no other ranking. There are other rankings that maybe tabulate a formula of all of them together, but none of them puts equal weight to all the other rankings, and that's one of the things that's exciting about On3. And so when you say Michael Allen, On3 consensus 4-star, quick explanation for the listeners of what that means.
No, thank you for informing me, Matt. And I think it's a pretty good way to go about it, right? Because a lot of times if you're going on one service, you're basically counting on one set of eyeballs to make that determination on, how many stars somebody's going to get. I think it's probably a much more accurate representation of what to expect if you're pooling all these 4 different databases together and coming up with a consensus. So 4-star consensus rating gives him about an 89.675 rating, which we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of that. But, if you're looking at it like an exam in college, that's a B+. That's really good. I don't know if that's, the best way to look at it. But 25th ranked in this position, according to these consensus ratings in the nation at running back, and 9th overall in the state of North Carolina. He just had a deep run in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. Matt, tell me a little bit about Michael Allen. I know he's a guy that was at the top of the wish list for this coaching staff in terms of running back talent. So what's to expect with Michael Allen? Is he the next running back in the pipeline at NC State?
Yeah, he kind of built and athletically a little bit in the mold of Nyheim Hines. Not quite as freakishly athletic and fast as Nyheim Hines, but similar body type. Maybe a little thicker than Nyheim and speed. Probably, I don't think there's been a running back as fast as Michael Allen since Nyheim Hines coming into the program. And what I like about Michael Allen is he's very productive as a receiver too, which I think you have to be as a running back nowadays. And I think that's something Tim Beck really wants to get involved, is having those screen games with the running back. He saw more success with that this year with Ricky Person and Bam Knight than he did last year, their first year in the system. But Michael Allen's more probably trained for it, more used to it. That wasn't something that Ricky Person and Bam Knight did a lot previously. He did lead his team to a state title game appearance. They lost to Greensboro Dudley, but he's been on NC State's radar since he was a sophomore in high school. And I've had sources telling me back to the fall of 2020 that Michael Allen was the guy they really wanted in the class. Yeah, I think he probably suffered a little bit from a knee injury he had during the spring. It might have hurt his stock a little bit, but when healthy, he is a freak athlete. Great baseball player too. We just talked about MJ Morris. Michael Allen's another great baseball player too, so a very good competitor from a winning program. And he might have a chance to play early just because we don't know what the running back position is going to be.
I was just about to say, Matt, I mean, you look at NC State these past few years, freshman running backs have gotten their opportunities to be contributors on this team. And, Zonovan Knight's decision that's going to play a big impact on, how quickly we could expect to see Michael Allen on the field. I know running back's a position that NC State still feels pretty good about, even with the absence of, Ricky Person deciding to move on to the NFL draft. Even if Zonovan Knight decides to move on to the NFL draft, you still got Jordan Houston as a productive back that's kind of waited his turn for his role. I would expect he's probably the favorite to be the starting running back if Zonovan Knight moves on. And, of course, he'd probably be a 1B type option even if Zonovan Knight stays. Of course, Delbert Mims is a guy that the coaching staff has been really high on over the spring into the summer and through the season. I mean, I know he's gotten some limited reps. It's just a crowded room at the time, but you have to think Michael Allen steps in and starts competing for snaps immediately, particularly if Zonovan Knight decides to move on. So exciting news for NC State. I think Michael Allen's a name that, of the names we're going to mention today, State fans should really circle. Might be a fan favorite in years to come, just considering that speed. And running back's always a good position to be a fan favorite, right? If you're scoring touchdowns, you're breaking loose for big plays.
I thought the backup quarterback's the fan favorite, right?
Not when the starting quarterback's playing well. Only when the starting quarterback's, when the starting quarterback's playing well, he's the fan favorite, Devin Laird. Although I don't know, Drake Thomas is just so much he just exudes so much NC State energy, just that, lunch pail, hand in the dirt, just a hard-working dude. I mean, all these guys are hard-working, but Drake Thomas, just a dude. He might be the fan favorite. A lot of them. Anyways, let's move on. Offensive line. Now, Matt, I'm going to let you take the lead here on how much we want to digress. I'll name the one that we can count for sure. Rylan Van, 3-star center. He was the first to commit to NC State. His brother Davin, of course, is already a member of the team. He comes from Cary, North Carolina. Davin got some quality snaps, some time on the defensive line this season. Stepped up big, particularly when there were some injuries on the defensive line. Rylan Van, of course, on the other side of the line of scrimmage, comes in as a center. Grant Gibson coming back next year, so don't expect him to compete for a starting gig necessarily next year unless there were injuries. And there's also another name of offensive linemen that Matt is telling me we expect to sign tomorrow. Today is Tuesday, December 14th, so I'm going to just toss this over to Matt, talk about the offensive line prospects NC State signing.
I like the way you're trying to dance around the.
Well, Matt, you're the guy with the sources. You're the guy with the sources. You're doing the reporting. I'm not going to steal your thunder. You give away as much information as you choose to, and then you also choose to keep as much information as you want to, because it's a great reason why you should head over to the Wolfpacker.com and sign up for that $1 subscription for the whole year, because then you'll know all this stuff even before the podcast comes out.
I'll say this. One of the best things that On3 is really going to revolutionize the game is they have this called the Recruiting Prediction Machine, RPM. And it takes a lot of analytical tools into consideration, predictions from recruiting analysts, from fan site editors like myself, from recruiting analysts like Chad Simmons, track record of the universities and the respective recruiting coaches, visits, geographical locations. All of this kind of puts it into a historical perspective, spits out a percentage based on what the analytics say. And as of Tuesday afternoon when we recorded this podcast, Zacchaeus peaked, I think, over 98% odds of ended up at NC State. So that's who Justin's referring to. This podcast is going up on signing day afternoon once all the players are in. Peaked was to announce at 9 a.m. I put on the premium message board, if you remember, $1. You could have found this out, that everything was looking pretty good with Peak. Came down to NC State and Louisville. So, which, obviously we're recording this podcast without knowing what he's doing. He may have picked Louisville and surprised completely everybody. But if he did pick NC State as expected, this guy who on 3, not the on 3 consensus, but the on 3 ranking of on 3 itself, has, I believe, the highest rated prospect in NC State's class, if he did went ahead and pick NC State. And he filled the need. They really needed a guy who could potentially play offensive tackle in the system. Now, Rylan Van, we know he's signing. It would be cool if he was the first one to sign, first to commit, first to sign, right? I really believe if Rylan Van were 2 inches taller, he would have been a 4-star center. The fact that he's barely over 6 foot tall probably is what, you know, may be a reason why he's not as highly rated or heavily recruited. I'm sure colleges just assumed he was going to go to NC State, where his brother Davin Van is. Like his brother, he's an excellent wrestler in high school, and NC State has had a lot of success with wrestlers and linemen in college, so that's something to watch. I like Rylan a lot. He's got to get bigger. He's only about 270 pounds, so he's probably got to add a lot of weight. But he kind of reminds me a lot of Grant Gibson physically, in that mold of a Grant Gibson type. So it would not surprise me within a few years, really within a couple of years, he's on the 2 deep. But NC State got quite a collection of good young centers. Good problem to have. But they really like Lyndon Cooper, and they really like Dylan McMahon, who's starting at guard. So they got some options at center. They got that part down pat. It'll be interesting to see what they do at offensive tackle. Even if Peak is in the class, I think they're going to look hard at the transfer portal. They made a hard run at Florida International transfer. Miles Frazier came down for an official visit, but when your final 3 is Florida State, LSU, and Ohio State, that's tough team to compete with, and it just shows you how the transfer portal works, which is always the cautionary tale with the transfer portal. Easier said than done. Don't just assume because there's a bunch of names in the portal you can go out and find somebody. Well, the guy you think might be good enough for you, so might Alabama, and that makes it very tough. So, but I'm a big Rylan Van fan, and I'm very interested to see. I thought his brother had a great year this year, and he looked like a future star on the defensive line, and we'll see how Rylan turns out.
Is it possible NC State could be becoming center university? Not as catchy as QBU. I don't know. But not a bad title to have. Our offensive line university after Icky gets picked in the, projected top 5. I saw him go as high as 2 overall in the 2022 NFL draft. We'll see how the mock drafts and the real draft ends up coming about. But one thing you said there, Matt, just something to consider as we kind of go along on the signing day. You know, it's going to be a stacked room for a lot of these guys. It's going to be hard for a lot of these guys to compete for, real snaps in year one. But the benefit that they're going to get is there's so much returning talent. There's so much returning experience. There's going to be really, really strong senior leadership on this team, considering, you get all 4 captains back. The chemistry of this team has already been really strong, just kind of dating back to 2020. A lot of the same nucleus of this group remains going into 2022. It's just going to be a great locker room environment for a lot of these young guys to kind of come up in and get their first season of college football, their first offseason of college football, just kind of working along these guys that have been here, done that, gone through the reps. They're going to learn pretty quickly, what it's going to take to succeed at the college level. And you look at a guy like Rylan Van, it's going to do a world of wonders for him to be taking practice snaps day in, day out behind Grant Gibson, just seeing firsthand, what it takes to get to that point. And I think it's going to be a great thing for a lot of these guys, down the road. But let's continue to move on as we trudge through the position groups here. We'll go with our last offensive player. We'll finish it out with the receivers. There's one receiver, Terrell Timmons Jr. out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Rated a 3-star on 3 consensus rating, 84.125, mid-80s. 27th ranked overall prospect in the state of North Carolina. What do you see in Terrell Timmons? It's a position group that NC State was stacked in terms of experience and young talent this past season. Emeka Mezi's gone after this year. We'll see about Thayer Thomas. We'll see about Devin Carter. I would guess at least one of them comes back if I had to, bet a future on it or something. But Terrell Timmons is going to walk into a very crowded receiving group with a lot of talent in it. Where does he step in? What's kind of the role you see him? Are there any good player comparisons for Terrell Timmons?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because he was a guy that wasn't on the radar, had a really good performance at camp. Then NC State went and watched him play a game. He had over 100 yards receiving, a couple of touchdowns, and one touchdown. He went right by the combination of Todd Goebel and Joker Phillips on the a couple of NC State coaches on the sidelines. So, they just got to the point where they had to offer. Receiver was not a big priority in this class. And full disclosure, the guy they really wanted was at the position for the longest time was Wesley Grimes from Millbrook High School in Raleigh, where Grimes chose Wake Forest over NC State, had an unbelievable senior season, got offered by Notre Dame and North Carolina, and Clemson was looking at him, but he stuck with Wake Forest from what I gathered, unless there's a surprise on signing day, to his credit. And, Timmons was the guy that put himself on the map over the summer, kind of a next in line if Grimes went elsewhere, and so they quickly pounced on Timmons, and he quickly accepted it. So, I saw him play in a game this year. He had a nice performance in the game I saw him play. He's one of those guys. I haven't played receiver long. He's only been a receiver for a couple of years, but there's some real natural playmaking abilities that you like to see. I agree with you. It's going to probably be tough for him to get on the field right away. Particularly if Thea Thomas and Devin Carter both come back. But that's fine. I think he could use a year to kind of get bigger and stronger before he gets in. I'm not sure I know if somebody off the top of my head that he's kind of similar to, but 6'1", 170 pounds, running the 4.5s in the 40, got some playmaking ability. And he's still learning how to be a receiver, so his best football still ahead of him. But you hit it on the nail. Time is going to be on a lot of these guys' sides. I mean, there's a lot of these guys. We'll have a story out Wednesday about most likely to play as a true freshman, and you're going to find it's not going to be a long list. It's just the reality of the situation is a lot of these guys have to wait time, but that's fine. That will pay dividends 2 or 3 years from now when all these guys leave. These guys will be older, more physically mature, ready to step in and play a bigger role than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and you just look at, you kind of go down the list of the ratings of this class. The 3 4-stars, linebacker, running back, and defensive line, 3 positions that NC State's pretty set on moving into 2022. Let's go ahead and go over to the defense. I mentioned defensive line. We'll talk about it. That's one of the position groups in terms of recruiting I think NC State fans should get excited about, because you talk about pipelines. It seems like, go back 20 years, pick any NC State team, there's probably an NFL caliber, at least one NFL caliber NC State defensive lineman on the roster. Let's start with the 4-star on-3 consensus guy, Brandon Cleveland out of Tampa, Florida, 6'3", 263 pounds, ranked 46 overall among defensive linemen, 389th overall in the country. We got Nick Campbell, 3-star on-3 consensus, 98th out of the state of Florida. He's from Lake Minneola, Florida, ranked 81st among defensive linemen in the class. And then DJ Jackson out of Sumter, South Carolina, 6'2", 215. Seeing more of an edge rusher type body there. 13th out of the state of South Carolina, 3-star on 3 consensus, 133rd overall among defensive line prospects. It seems like NC State went out and got 3 guys that are going to fit NC State's 3-man front system. You kind of see that they have this vision of the prototype body that they want, and then you've seen in these past couple classes they've gone and gotten them. And be guys that are just going to fit into kind of the Charlie Wiles position group, nasty, go get them, hand in the dirt type guys. Who makes you the most excited of this class? I guess kind of just give your Reader's Digest on these 3 dudes, and of all of these guys, you maybe kind of look at defensive line as maybe the opportunity where some of them could get some early playing time. Is that maybe a safe leap?
Well, they only lose Daniel Joseph right now from the defensive line, so got to figure Terrell Dawkins too kind of got a little bit more playing time as the year went on. Maybe he gets back into into the swing of things if he's fully healthy. We don't know the status of guys like Savion Jackson, C.J. Clark, what their availability is going to be in the spring, and how ready they'll be for the start of the season. But you do get Corey Durden back, and that's a big return.
First team All ACC Corey Durden.
Yeah. So he's one of the 7 super seniors set to be on the team. And you're talking about Grant Gibson, third team All ACC, Tyler Baker Williams, honorable mention All ACC, Tanner Engel, first team All ACC, Corey Durden, first team All ACC. That's 4 All ACC guys. Isaiah Moore was honorable mention, even though he missed 5 games.
Right,
so
then you got Peyton Wilson and Isaiah Moore, who would have been first team All ACC guys had they stayed healthy.
Mm-hmm. So I really liked the defensive line group. I think it was, as a group, mainly because it was probably one of the few groups that had some numbers to it, probably stands out. I'm a big Brandon Cleveland fan. I like his film. He looks athletic. He's about 6'3", 6'4", 260. I think he's a guy that, if of the group, he's probably on my list of 3 guys that I could see playing early if it all goes right for him. Mick Campbell, more of a wider frame. I think he's also 6'3", 260. I think they kind of see how big he gets. I know his high school coach told me he thought he could end up being a nose tackle. DJ Jackson had a torn ACL in July, surgery right around the end of July, 1st of August. So he's probably a guy that, going to need a year to get back from the surgery and fully rehabilitate. I think if I had to guess, I would say Jackson ends up at nose tackle, Campbell and Cleveland kind of on the outside, but they all end up, 6'2" to 6'4", pushing 270-pound range, which you hit it right on the nail, Justin. That's exactly what the type they're looking for. I think they're looking for guys like Davin Vann and Savion Jackson, both of whom are like 6'2", 6'3", 290 out there on the end. I mean, and so, but I think this was pretty good work. And, all 3 of their guys, look, Cleveland was one committed to Miami. Jackson was an NC State, South Carolina battle, and Campbell had probably a dozen Power 5 offers to his credit. So those were 3 well-regarded by college recruited defensive linemen. So I think that was a good job by Charlie Wiles and company.
Yeah, and just kind of to build on that before we finish off these defensive position groups, 12-man signing class, smaller class than normal. A lot of teams are in a similar boat in terms of just the size of this class. NC State was able to be a little bit pickier in this class and didn't have to necessarily fill up the class with, guys that would typically be on the bubble. Do we offer them? Do we not? The NC State kind of gets its choice, right? For the most part, you mentioned Wesley Grimes earlier in the podcast. There weren't a lot of guys that NC State had at the top of their list that, were swing and a miss. For the most part, they got a lot of the guys that they wanted. And, when's the last time you could say an NC State recruiting class, 25% of the class is 4 stars and the rest is 3 stars. So, pretty good work for NC State on the recruiting trail. Let's move on to the linebackers to wrap up the defense. We start with the highest ranked of the On3 consensus rating, another 4-star, rated 89.75 overall. That's the highest On3 consensus rating. The prize prospect out of the state of North Carolina, ranked 8th overall in the state. Torrin Wright at A.L. Brown High in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And then we move on to Dawan Thompson, another in-state prospect, 3-star according to On3 consensus, but a high 3-star at that. 16th overall prospect out of the state of North Carolina, 70th in the nation at linebacker. Torrin Wright ranked 33rd overall at linebacker in the country. We talk about loaded position groups. Linebacker, again, maybe when you have 2 potential first-team All-ACC, really 3. Where was Drake Thomas on the All-ACC list? Was he first team? Or was he second team?
Drake Thomas was first team.
First team. Okay. So, you're talking about a starting lineup with 3 guys that, had they stayed healthy, could have been arguably first-team All-ACC guys with Isaiah Moore, Peyton Wilson, Drake Thomas. besides injuries, that's going to be your starting lineup next season. And then you've got some really talented reserves behind those guys. But where do these guys fit in, and how excited are you for the future of? I mean, you'd have to assume that probably all three of those guys go pro after next year. So there's going to be a need going into 2023 for some talented linebackers to step up.
Yeah, and again, I would say we preached before, like the quarterback, right? Think spring 2023. If you're a linebacker, think spring 2023. And I think in the case of both of these guys, I had a chance to watch both of them in action this year. If you go to our YouTube page, search for Torn Wright, search for Dejon Thompson, and you'll see them in the highlight package I put together from their respective games. Yeah, Torn probably a little bit more physically developed. He's interesting. He kind of reminded me of watching a Terrell Manning in high school. I think he's got a lot of upside. I really do. And Dejon, what I like about Dejon is he plays a lot of special teams. So that should get him onto the field early when he's ready. He's got to get a lot stronger. He's a skinny linebacker. I think the high school listed him at 200 pounds. I would have guessed more like 190ish. But either way, he's got to get bigger for a linebacker, and he's got that chance to do that. He's not being pushed into a prominent role right away. They do have some good young linebackers in the fold. Devon Betty looked real good when he got a chance to play this year, second-year freshman. We know how high they're on Jordan Poole and Caden Fordham, a couple of true freshmen that just walked in. Now you're adding Torn Wright, who's one of the most highly recruited linebackers in the state, and Dejon Thompson, who I think didn't have a whole lot of offer, but a lot of the recruiting analysts that saw him really liked him. And his film does pop out now. It does pop to you. So, and again, you get to develop them at the rate that they need to be developed at. You don't have to rush them. They'll be ready to play when they're ready to play because you have the luxury of redshirting a lot of these guys. And so that's the beauty of all this. But, I think Tony Gibson got himself a couple of really good prospects for that linebacker room. And they're not forced to play them quicker than they needed to be played.
Of any position group on NC State's roster right now, just looking into the 4 or 5 year future of the depth chart, does any position group jump out to you as stronger than the linebacker unit at NC State right now?
Yeah, that's probably the strongest. And it's so hard because you're thinking 4 to 5 years down the road and just thinking entirely upon recruiting, right? Because those positions have been dominated by the same players for what will be 3 years running by the time the 2022 season's over. It's very unusual to pretty much have the same cast of characters for 2019, 2020, 2019 through 2022. So 2023 is going to look very, very interesting. Very interesting. But we'll worry about that.
We still got to finish 2021. I mean, it's still a bowl game.
We're just hoping we have jobs in 2023. So we'll worry about that later.
Jobs.
Right?
Let's hope that the AI robots that I guess can now reproduce, haven't taken over the world by then. But we'll worry about that. We'll just procrastinate on that. But let's finish out this podcast talking about the last two of the 12-man signing class, a couple of DBs, a couple of top 25 overall prospects out of the state of North Carolina, a couple of listed corners. You've got Jackson Vick out of Bailey, North Carolina, coming out of Southern Nash High, 5'10", 174 pounds, ranked 18th overall in the state of North Carolina in this class. And Isaiah Crowell, another family guy getting into the program. Of course, his older brother Micah Crowell is a wide receiver at NC State a couple of classes ago. He signed with the Wolfpack. Isaiah Crowell, the next in line at East Forsyth High School at Kernersville, North Carolina. 6 foot, 180 pounds, ranked 23rd overall of in-state prospects. Both 3 stars, both rated right in the middle of the mid-80s, 3-star ratings. What do you like about these guys? Are they true corners? Are they guys that you could maybe see change positions once they get to college? And how quickly will NC State need these guys? Because it's like a broken record, but NC State's pretty set at every position going into 2022, with the exception of injuries. It'd be hard to see a lot of these guys get early playing time. But what do you like about Jackson Vick and Isaiah Crowell?
Yeah, I like Jackson Vick a lot. We put up a scouting report on Jackson Monday. And again, you can see that video on the YouTube channel. He pretty much only played corner in 2 games this year, mainly reviewed as a running back at Southern Mass. But yours truly is one of the lucky guys who, when he went to watch him play, he actually played corner. So he got a good idea of what he could do at the position. And Jackson, to me, is a sleeper to be able to play right away. The cornerback position always seems to be a fluid one. You do have Dewey Pitts coming back for his super senior year. You do have Shaheem Battle, who took a nice jump forward as a second-year starter. Aiden White had a lot of experience, even if he didn't play as much at the end of the year. You're hoping to get Cecil Powell back full strength after he redshirted this year. Tayshaun Smith was supposed to redshirt this year. I think they had to end up burning it late in the year. So there is depth there that he's got to kind of navigate through, but he's kind of a sleeper. I don't think you'll see more than 1 or 2 true freshmen, but he's the guy that you could see playing 4 games, right, and preserving the red shirt. In the case of Isaiah Crowell, the nickel position we talked about, he's probably going to play nickel. We talked about how Tyler Baker-Williams, nobody, by the way, puts nickel in the database. So we need to start adding that to the database because it's becoming a specified position. But, Tyler Baker-Williams is coming back. Joshua Pierre-Louis probably played well enough to start at nickel. So you have a great 1-2 punch there. So again, like you said, broken record. But Isaiah Crowell is somebody that can develop at his own pace. If he's ready to play, he's ready to play. But if he's not, they don't have to force him out there unless there's injuries to the position. But I would say this, he's a very physical guy. I went and watched him play too. You got to see that video on the YouTube channel. He's a physical guy for his size. He looks athletic, comes from a great family. Brother Micah is a receiver at NC State. Older brother went to Virginia. His dad was a pretty big-time NFL receiver for the Detroit Lions. His uncle Angelo was a pretty good NFL linebacker for the Buffalo Bills. So football runs through the family, and Isaiah and Michael Allen were kind of in torn right. Those were the 3 guys that were on NC State's radar a long time. They were all off it, I think, during, before, or after the sophomore season of high school football. So they've been on NC State's radar for 3+ years now. And Crowell is one of that group. So I like him. I just think it's just a matter of it's a good position room right now. And so you might hear the train coming by. There's not a pressing need for him to have to play right away unless he's just that good.
That's if you don't hear it in the podcast, that's the NC State bandwagon for 2022. You better jump on now before it's too. It's already passed.
It was a longer than normal train.
I mean,
it's still going.
Okay,
it's
not too late. You better jump on now. That's gonna do it. That's all of our 12-man signing class. So for more analysis, details on these prospects, you want to go back in time to read what Matt Carter thought 2 years ago. He's going to put all that on the On3 network. He's going to put that on the Wolfpacker.com, and that's why you should take advantage of that special deal going on. It's not going to be around forever, so take advantage now. Just in time for the holidays, $1 buys you a year's worth of premium subscription to the On3 network, which of course includes the Wolfpacker.com. So read all about the 2022 signing class and everything going even into the future. And Matt's already talking about 2023. You want to read about what's to come next year. You want to read anything NC State recruiting, you got to be on the Wolfpacker.com. So take advantage of that deal.
For $1, you could get not only this signing day, but it pretty much would take you up to next signing day too, when it will be a much larger class. I can go ahead and tell you, NC State is going big game fishing in 2023, and why not? You've had back-to-back really big seasons. You're going to be preseason top, potentially 20. Maybe that might be conservative. Now, and you're about to lose a whole bunch of guys from those teams. That's a good time to go fishing for some stars. And so that's another reason for a buck. You're going to get a heck of a recruiting cycle coming up in 2023.
You've got me excited, Matt, and that's a great point. You take advantage of that deal now. We're talking about 2022 so much, the exciting football season ahead. I mean, the regular season's already over, so if you buy it now, it's going to take you all the way through next regular season. You're going to get all that recruiting information, and basketball's just like icing on the cake, right? Okay, so last reminders: subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play. Download it, rate it, give us 5 stars wherever you listen. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. That helps us out a ton. Matt mentioned several recruiting videos that we have up on our YouTube channel. Go check them out. Subscribe while you're at it. Give this video a thumbs up. Give those videos a thumbs up and drop a comment below the prompt for the listeners on our YouTube. Drop a comment on which prospect you're most excited to watch at Carter Finley Stadium in the years to come. I don't think there's any wrong answer there, but name who you're most excited about. And lastly, follow us on social media. You can follow our main account at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will, and you can give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on the Wolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.